The murder of Rasputin, Russia's infamous mad monk, is the fodder for a great historical tale that blends fact and legend. But the death of the controversial holy man and faith healer had a combustible effect on the tense state of affairs in pre-revolution Russia. Rasputin was killed on December 30, 1916, in the basement of the Moika Palace, the St. Petersburg residence of Prince Felix Yusupov, the richest man in Russia and the husband of the Tsar's only niece, Irina. His battered body was discovered in the Neva River a few days later. In the decade prior, Rasputin had risen rapidly through Russian society, starting as an obscure Siberian peasant-turned-wandering holy man and then becoming one of the most prominent figures in the Tsar's inner circle. Born in 1869 in the village of Pokrovskoye, on the Tura River that flows eastward from the Ural Mountains, where Europe meets Asia and Siberia. He seemed destined for an ordinary life, despite a few conflicts in his youth with local authorities for unruly behavior. He married a local woman, Praskovia Dubrovina, became the father of 3 surviving children, Maria, Dmitry, and Varvara, and worked on his family's farm. Rasputin's life changed in 1892, when he spent months at a monastery, putting him on the path to international renown. Despite his later nickname, the Mad Monk, Rasputin never took holy orders. Men in Rasputin's position usually gave up their past lives and relationships, but Rasputin continued to see his family. His daughters later live with him in St. Petersburg and support his wife financially. His religious fervor, combined with an appealing personal charisma, brought Rasputin to the attention of some Russian Orthodox clergymen and then senior members of the imperial family, who then introduced him to Nicholas II and his wife, Alexandra. Nicholas wrote to one of his ministers in October 1906, "A few days ago I received a peasant from the Tobolsk district, Grigori Rasputin, who brought me an icon of Saint Simon Verkhoturyi. He made a remarkably strong impression both on Her Majesty and on myself, so that instead of 5 minutes our conversation went on for more than an hour." The imperial couple had consulted unconventional spiritual advisors in the past, but Rasputin filled this role by his ability to read their inner hopes and tell them what they wanted to hear. He encouraged Nicholas to have more confidence in his role as Tsar, and Alexandra found that his counsel soothed her anxieties. By the First World War, Rasputin was also providing political advice and making recommendations for ministerial appointments, much to the dismay of the Russian elite. Rasputin cemented his relationship with the Tsar and Tsarina when he supposedly helped alleviate their only son Alexei's hemophilia. Rasputin's alleged healing powers continue to be debated today. The Tsar's sister, Grand Duchess Olga, wrote that she observed Rasputin healing Alexei by kneeling at the foot of his bed and praying. The calming atmosphere that he created in the palace may have assisted with the recovery. Alexandra's lady-in-waiting, Baroness Sophie Buxhoeden, thought that Rasputin employed peasant folk medicine used in Siberian villages to treat internal bleeding in horses. Historians continue to debate Rasputin's impact on Alexei's health. In his 2016 book, Rasputin, Faith, Power, and the Twilight of the Romanovs, Douglas Smith observes, Rasputin's assurances calmed the anxious, fretful mother and filled her with unshakable confidence, and she, in turn, transferred this confidence to her ailing son, literally willing him back to health. In addition to increasing confidence in recovery, a key variable may have been Rasputin's insistence that doctors keep away from Alexei. Medical knowledge was still sparse, even though drugs like aspirin were available for treatment. Unfortunately for Alexei, aspirin, considered a cure-all remedy, had the then unknown side effect of thinning the blood, which would have exacerbated hemophilia symptoms. French historian Hélène Carrère d'Encausse argued that when Rasputin insisted that remedies prescribed by the doctors be thrown in the fire, the discarded medicine likely would have included aspirin. Rasputin's insistence that the doctors leave him alone would have improved his condition and appeared to create a miraculous improvement in his symptoms. Rasputin presented himself in the imperial court as holy man, despite no formal affiliation with the Russian Orthodox Church, and spoke as a self-appointed representative of the peasantry, but his behavior away from court offered a different portrait. His drunkenness and affairs with women of all social backgrounds, from street prostitutes to society ladies, scandalized the public. Rasputin appeared to bask in his fame, showing off shirts embroidered for him by the Empress and inviting her friends and servants to his home in Prokofskoye. Rasputin's wife appeared untroubled by his infidelities, commenting he has enough for all. The press, unshackled thanks to rights granted to them by Nicholas II in 1905, spread lurid tales about Rasputin both within Russia and abroad. Rumors about Rasputin's influence over the Tsarist regime spread throughout Europe. Petitioners, believing that Rasputin lived with the imperial family, mailed their requests to Rasputin, Tsar's Palace, St. Petersburg. Soldiers on World War spoke of Rasputin having an intimate affair with Alexandra, passing it off as common knowledge without evidence. As the war progressed, outlandish stories expanded to include Rasputin's supposed treason with the German enemy, including a fantastical tale that he sought to undermine the war effort by starting a cholera epidemic in St. Petersburg with poisoned apples imported from Canada. What the public thought they knew about Rasputin had a greater impact than his actual views and activities, fueling demands that he be removed from his position of influence by any means necessary. Until he murdered Rasputin, Felix Yusupov lived a comparatively aimless life of privilege. One of Nicholas II's daughters, also named Grand Duchess Olga, worked as a nurse during the war and criticized Yusupov's refusal to enlist, writing to her father, "Felix is a downright civilian, dressed all in brown, virtually doing nothing, an utterly unpleasant impression he makes, a man idling in such times." Plotting Rasputin's murder gave Yusupov the opportunity to reinvent himself as a patriot and man of action, determined to protect the throne from a malign influence. For Yusupov and his co-conspirators, the removal of Rasputin could give Nicholas II one last chance of restoring the reputation and prestige of the monarchy. With Rasputin gone, the Tsar would be more open to the advice of his extended family, the nobility and the Duma, and less dependent on Alexandra. There was hope that he would return from military headquarters and once again govern from St. Petersburg. The most well-known account of Rasputin's murder was the one that Yusupov wrote in his memoirs, published in 1928. Yusupov claimed to have invited Rasputin to his palace to meet his wife Irina, who was in fact away at the time, and then served him a platter of cakes and numerous glasses of wine laced with potassium cyanide. To Yusupov's astonishment, Rasputin appeared to be unaffected by the poison. A desperate Yusupov borrowed the revolver of the Grand Duke Dmitry, the Tsar's cousin, and shot Rasputin multiple times, but was still unable to kill him. According to the memoir, this devil who was dying of poison, who had a bullet in his heart, must have been raised from the dead by the powers of evil. There was something appalling and monstrous in his diabolical refusal to die. There was reputedly water in his lungs when his remains were discovered, indicating that he had finally died by drowning. Yusupov's account of Rasputin's murder entered popular culture. The lurid scene was dramatized in numerous films about Rasputin and the Romanovs, and even made it into a 1970s disco hit by Boney M, which included the lyrics, "They put some poison into his wine. He drank it all and said, 'I feel fine.'" Rasputin's actual murder was probably far less dramatic. His daughter Maria, who fled Russia after the revolution and became a circus lion tamer billed as the daughter of the famous mad monk whose feats in Russia astonished the world, wrote her own book in 1929 that condemned Yusupov's actions and questioned the veracity of his account. She wrote that her father did not like sweets and never would have eaten a platter of cakes. The autopsy reports do not mention poison or drowning, but instead conclude that he was shot in the head at close range. Yusupov transformed the murder into an epic struggle of good versus evil to sell books and bolster his own reputation. The responses from the public were mixed, reflecting Rasputin's checkered reputation. The elite, from whence Yusupov and his co-conspirators came, rejoiced and applauded the killers when they appeared in public. The peasantry mourned Rasputin as one of their own, seeing the murder as one more example of the nobility controlling the Tsar. When a peasant rose to a position of influence with the Tsar, he was murdered by a wealthy man. To the dismay of Yusupov and his co-conspirators, Rasputin's murder did not lead to a radical change in Nicholas and Alexandra's polities. To the emergent Bolsheviks, Rasputin symbolized the corruption at the heart of the imperial court, and his murder was seen, rather accurately, as an attempt by the nobility to hold on to power at the continued expense of the proletariat. To them, Rasputin represented the broader problems with Tsarism. In the aftermath of the Russian Revolution, provisional government leader Alexander Kerensky went so far as to say, "Without Rasputin there would have been no Lenin."